So the first image is one to which I shall attach the label of community. Okay, so this image of the Mexican community. Okay, so we can just look at this idea of community itself and community as such in its abstract. But again, this is particular to Mexican community, or at least this observation. Okay. So the abstract expression of an idealized nation state, it has been used concretely at numerous, the abstract expression of an idealized nation state, it has been used concretely at numerous different levels, from the present village to the nation itself. It combines two main ideas. Okay, so this is again the idea of imagined community. So we're going back towards this idea of Benedict Anderson, and the notion of community is how it is produced as a cultural effect, ultimately. Okay, and now he divides this into two main ideas, ultimately attached to this community notion of, or the Mexican notion of community. First, it identifies a discernible population with a single bounded space, a territory or place. So again, we realize the geographic significance of community. Community with space. Now, thinking back on Arjun Appadurai, we also noticed that we have come towards this notion of spaceless community. So we already see that the traditional notion of community that produces this notion of Mexican itself is not necessarily accurate. So he's identifying the first notion of community ultimately bound in space. And of course, we're looking now beyond this and more postmodern, and we can see the importance of spaceless community, which of course is an ultimate, it plays an ultimate role in this notion of transnationality. Okay? Now, he says, in doing so in doing this, theoretical commitment of community and space, or ultimately spaced community, in merging these two ideas together, he sees we produce, so in doing so, again, this is at the bottom of page 158, okay, in doing so, it assumes that the social relationships in which community members participate will be much more intense within this space than beyond. Okay, so quite simply, he's saying that the notion of community, or the community itself, will be much more intense. The communality, or the sense of communality, will be much stronger within the geographical area than it will be outside. Now, what's interesting is we can perhaps see a comparison here, and we've noticed with the different notions of satellite communities that we sometimes see an overcompensation. For example, Irish communities in, say, Canada, which almost become more Irish than Irish, or embrace more traditional, and remember this notion of tradition is ultimately a modern notion, tradition of course being a modern concept, a concept coming out of our post-industrial modern phase, which we spoke about in past lectures. So this notion itself, that these communities don't necessarily suffer from a lesser sense, but we can see sometimes there's an overcompensation, or almost an idealizing or a fossilizing of the notion of this particular culture, Irish culture, say, in Canada. Okay? So again, in doing so, it assumes that the social relationships in which community members participate will be much more intense within this space than beyond. So that the notion of community will be stronger within the geographical space of the nation than outside. But again, we can see countless examples of almost the national camaraderie of people who would, say, Irish people abroad, who wouldn't necessarily come together in Ireland. Say people from all different walks of life will find themselves unify abroad, maybe on holidays, just for sake of something slightly more familiar. Again, this identity of, same and other. While there may be a class division in Ireland, say upper class wouldn't associate with lower class in Ireland, outside of Ireland they would be very quick to maintain this notion of Irish community, and or even quick to identify their common communal similarities and interests and identity in the wake of, say, Arab culture or Chinese culture or African culture, American culture, while abroad. Okay, so it seems within the face of the other here, we again get this sense of identity and similarity and unity. Okay. So the second example here, it also assumes that members will treat the place of the community as principal environment to which they adjust their actions, and correspondingly that they will monitor local events much more closely than developments further afield. Again, this is the bias. This is ultimately a bias of spatial proximity over spatial distance, that people will care more about what happens in Ireland while they are in Ireland. Again, we can see examples or counterexamples of this, say almost a heightened devotion to the Irish cause in, say, America, or the pro-IRA Irish terrorist cause in America, that does not equate or does not have an equivalent sentiment in Ireland. So ultimately we can see this overcompensation or devotion for the Irish cause and the Irish Catholics, and almost a black and white reading of the situation outside of America, where we fail to see the specific unifying qualities of these arguments in Ireland. So where is it seen as people are almost more affected by the troubles in Northern Ireland in America than they are in Ireland, at least on a cultural or level of cultural significance or social identity. Okay, and not just on socio-political or even physical ways of even being affected by explosions, detonations in Northern Ireland. Okay, so that's the first of. Sorry, so when I said, so we still have, this is one point we've made which has 2 points itself, and the first point has 2 points which we've covered. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second point of our first observation of community. Okay? So the first observation was community as it's related to space. So if we have to say 1 is community, 1A breaks into I and II, so 1AI, or breaks into the notion of bounded space, okay, as opposed to spaceless communities, and 1AII would be this notion of affectedness, of spatial proximity, of being more affected in Ireland than outside of Ireland. Okay, so now if we have 1B,